I would like to introduce Marvin Montgomery. Marvin Montgomery is an author, speaker, and a sales training consultant with more than 30 years of experience. Marvin has assisted hundreds of organizations improve their productivity, and is doing so has earned widespread national recognition and praise. It stems from Marvin's informative, practical, and stimulating programs that reflect his basic philosophy. Preparation and practice are the keys to sales success. Without further ado, I will now hand it over to Marvin Montgomery.
Thank you, Adina, and I want to thank everyone who is under the sound of my voice for the next 30 minutes or so to talk about how to become a trusted advisor. And we're going to break this webinar information up into 3 specific areas because we know there's a stigma around salespeople. And to break that stigma, we need to know how to engage our customers in those first couple seconds to remove the persona that they have of us. And it's not good. Every time you think of a salesperson, you think of someone's going to tell you what to do and talk you into it. So we're going to focus on how do you become a trusted advisor and not that stereotypical sales mentality that is out there right now. The first area we're going to talk about is what our approach should look like. The second area we're going to talk about is what the benefits are to that approach. And then we're going to key in on one specific area which I think is extremely important. Talks about, are you active listening or are you waiting? And I think a lot of times we do ask questions, but we don't take time to actively listen, to the response. So I'm going to ask that we move to that first area where it talks about how we should engage people to build that know, like, and trust. And if you look at number 1, it says active listening. And these are not any particular order, because I could have had asking questions and then active listening, or active listening and then asking questions, because we need to be doing those 2 things in tandem. If you think about it, if you go to the doctor, they call it an exam. HR calls it a interview. In our profession, we call it qualifying. I've heard it called discovery. I've heard it an exploration meeting, needs analysis, needs assessment. You are there initially, to let that person know the only reason for this initial visit, or even for the existing customer, is to find out what the needs are and then provide a customized solution, to those needs. So I love this approach because sometimes what happens is we get into what I call presentation mode. And you're not there to do a presentation. You're there to do an assessment. And you can't do an assessment if you're doing too much telling and talking. So active listening and asking questions is the correct approach. And if you think about it, that approach also works in other areas, like home. If you want to have a great relationship with your family, your friends, your significant other, I'll tell you what, you better be asking questions and listening, because one of the first things that happens is it shows the person that you care. You've all heard that expression. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Or here's the other problem. I've seen people only do one of these 2. They ask questions, but then don't active listen to the response. Or they active listen, but then they don't ask the follow-up questions. It's a combination of both. You have to ask questions and actively listen. Actively listening and asking questions. You're doing those 2 things in tandem to really peel back the onion to discover what exactly is going on here. I love the analogy that I use all the time when I'm doing my sales training. You're going to find out one of 2 things. Either it's yes or not now. And that's what I want to find out. Is this a yes or is this a not now? We need to look at every especially a new opportunity, not as a prospect, but as a suspect. And if you look at them as a suspect, any detective show you watch, they always say, round up all the usual suspects and bring them in for questioning. And that's what we want to do here. We want to we have this suspect that's given us an opportunity to meet with them. Our job is to ask questions and listening. And by the way, part of questioning is listening. You got to have both of them. You can't just ask questions and not listen, like I've said, or actively listen and not ask questions. So we're not there to do a show up and throw up or an information dump. So you've got to look at the last couple opportunities you've had. How much telling and talking did I do? Or did I do more listening and asking questions? Actually, I always refer to active listening and asking questions as wisdom. All of us have someone that we can call any time of the day or night, and all they will do is ask you questions and listen with a true concern. And that's what we want to do. We want to ask questions and listen with a true concern. Stephen Covey, in his 7 principles, he even talks about it. He talks about seek understanding first before being understood. And that's what we're doing with this active listening and asking questions. We're seeking understanding first before being understood. In the carpentry field, they refer to it as measure twice and cut once. So our twice is active listening and asking questions. Measure twice, cut once. You don't want to make any assumptions at all when you're in front of this opportunity. So let's move to the second area, which talks about if we're going to do this, I want you to do it because you know the benefits. So what are some of the benefits? And I've listed some here, and I'm sure you can come up with some more, but I listed a few of the benefits just to kind of sell you on the importance of doing this if you're not quite sold yet, because so many salespeople are taught to do a presentation because you're told, well, you're only going to have a few minutes, so you better get out what you want to get out as quickly as you can. Well, that's not the approach you want to use. Look at the first benefit. I want to show this person that you care. Remember the stigma that's all the way around us. When you ask and listen, it immediately shows that person that you care about them and what their needs are and what they're trying to accomplish. The second thing is it saves time. What a strong benefit. If we know we only have a few minutes with this opportunity, why not get right to what the real issues and concerns are, if there are any at all, by asking questions and listening. It will save you time. Look at the third one. I don't want to assume. Asking and listening will eliminate assumptions. There's an expression out there that says if you ask and listen, the customer will tell you what's important to them and how they want to be sold. I don't want to assume I know. I want to know I know. So it's going to eliminate assumptions. So show customer that you care, save time, eliminate assumptions, but there's also a couple more benefits if you're not quite there yet. Another benefit of asking questions and listening is it uncovers all the needs. I found that there's 2 types of needs customers have. There's the identified need, and that's kind of what you're there to talk about. But there's also unidentified needs. These are things that they won't tell you unless you ask them. I learned a long time ago that people seldom identify all their needs directly. And what I mean by that is, if I said to you right now, I don't feel well, I'm not telling you all the story. I remember Paul Harvey would go, and here's the rest of the story. Well, if I said I don't feel well, what's the rest of the story? You won't find out the rest of the story until you ask me some questions. You listen, but now you got to drill down and ask me some questions. And you may even ask me 4 or 5 questions till you determine what's really going on with my health. So it uncovers all the needs, not just the identified need, but the unidentified need. It also services the pain, not just the problem, but the pain. Because maybe one of your questions was, how come you're thinking about doing this or doing that? What's motivating you to do this or that? Well, they may tell you, well, the company I'm working with now, their customer service isn't great, or there's the quality, or maybe delivery. Well, I want to drill down and find out what the pain is by saying, well, how's that affecting you? So when you're using questions the right way, not only you find out the problem, you can also surface the pain that goes along with the problem, because the pain helps them really become a little bit emotional about what's going on, and they will move based on that emotional driver called pain. So I want to find out what their pain is. And 6, another bullet point there is it determines real quickly whether I have a yes or a not now. And that's what I want. Is this a yes or is it a not now? Now you notice I'm not saying no, because it's never no. I want to find out if it's a yes or not now. If it's a yes, boy, let's move forward. If it's not now, then I'm going to close for another opportunity to close down the road. Hey, it sounds like right now there's no need for the services that we've been talking about, but let's schedule a time for us to revisit this down the road, because I know time brings about a change. I want to show this person that I care, because by doing that, whether they buy from me or not, I'll get the not now and not the no, because not now could also mean they refer me to somebody else. Not now could also mean they use my service later on down the road. It's never no. So uncover all the needs, both identified and unidentified. Surface the pain, not just the problem, because sometimes we ask that initial question, how come you're thinking about this or how come you're thinking about that? That just delivers the concern. I want to find out what the pain is by saying, how's that affecting you? And that's that secondary question that you ask to drill down on that. Plus, the last benefit I want to talk about is it determines whether or not you have a yes or not now, which means you're saving a lot of time. I was working with a company just recently, and I call it the quote and hope, where they're doing all these quotes, but they're quoting for suspects and not prospects. Remember I said the questions you ask will determine very quickly whether this person remains a suspect or moves to a level of prospect, which hopefully moves to a level of customer relationship. But we want to treat everybody as a suspect, even if it's a new customer calling you about something, because you want to start that excuse me, assessment process all over again. So hopefully these 6 benefits will get you to understand the importance of making sure you're not just doing the information dump. You're not just doing a show up and throw up. You're not just doing that telling and talking, but you're uncovering all the needs. You're surfacing the pain. You're determining if it's a yes or not now. You're showing that person that you care. All these benefits that we talked about, and there's really more. And I'll charge you to think about some additional benefits on your own after this webinar is over. What are some other benefits that may be exclusive just to the people that are on the phone here with me today that you know for a fact will pay big dividends if you begin asking questions and listening and not doing sometimes what I call death by PowerPoint. So that's the benefits. Now let's move to that third component. And by the way, if you have any questions, please jot them down after each segment, because at the end, I'm going to ask Adina if you typed in any questions that I might be able to answer, because we're going to save some time at the end for Q&A. Now, are you active listening or waiting? And I want to key in specifically on this whole active listening thing, because I've seen people ask questions, but then take the question that they ask and go off in the wrong direction. In other words, remember, asking and listening keeps from assuming. Well, if you're not actively listening, that means you're assuming. So once you ask the question, you have to actively listen to make sure that what they just said, you actually heard and took in. Because here's what happens when somebody's talking to us. There's a little thing called spare thinking time. And spare thinking time means that you all have the ability that are on the phone with me to think a lot faster than what I'm speaking. So what you want to be able to do is force yourself to pay attention and make sure that you're not racing ahead or second-guessing what's being said or even interrupting the customer while they're trying to share something with you. So there's some activities that we should be doing to force ourselves to pay attention, some of which you're probably doing right now while I'm talking. Some of you right now may be taking notes. And I'll tell you what, if I'm sitting in front of a suspect or a existing customer relationship, I have my pen, I have my pad or pencil, and I'm ready to take notes, because I want to show them that what they're saying is important. I also want to capture the information that they're saying to me, so I don't trust my memory. I love the tablets in the smartphones now, because there's so many different ways I can take notes now. I can record it. I can take a picture of it. I can send it back to my desktop. You know, I can go to my notes section on my phone and type it in there. There is no reason for you to be on this initial exploration meeting with this suspect or initial customer relationship and not walk away with some good notes that's going to help you close this deal later on down the road. So take notes and don't trust your memory. Actually, the first thing I'm writing down sometimes is the customer's name, so I don't forget that while I'm talking to them, during this meeting, whether it's on the phone or face-to-face. Second thing is, and it sounds obvious, but a part of listening is asking questions. So I'm going to remind everybody that you need to know what questions to ask. Because if you don't know what questions to ask, you will automatically go into presentation mode. And that's not why you're there, remember? You're not there to present. You're there to assess. You're not there to tell and talk. You're to find out there's a need for the services you provide. And you do that by asking questions. Because asking questions is also a form of being active and you're listening because you're peeling back the onion. You're doing some follow-up. I tell people all the time, learn to think in questions. Don't think in talking. Think in questions. Process. Analyze. Think about it. Remember, whoever raised you probably at one time said, you think before you speak. Think before you act. Questions will help you do that. Look at point 3. Paraphrase. Paraphrase. Repeat it back. That's another form of active listening. It forces you to understand what's being said. It shares with the person that you are paying attention. It's a great way to remember what's being said. I want to go back to 2 and 3 and combine those, because when you ask questions or paraphrase, the key to those 2 techniques of active listening is you ask questions and you pause. You paraphrase and you pause. You don't ask a question and keep on talking. You don't paraphrase and keep on talking. You're defeating the purpose. Let silence be your friend. You've heard the expression sometimes how people will talk themselves out of an opportunity. Well, this is where you can. Don't ask a question and then start talking. Don't repeat back and start talking. The whole purpose of doing that is to collect more information from the person you're talking to. Ask the question, pause. Paraphrase, pause. Let silence be your friend. So take notes, ask questions, paraphrase, but there's still more. There's a couple other techniques that we should be using to actively listen. Because if we're not actively listening, that means we're waiting to talk. What's number 4? Number 4 should be coming up on your screen, and we're going to talk about number 4. Because number 4 is acknowledge that you are listening. Because we like using this one on the telephone. Have you ever heard somebody say to you, hello, are you still there? Well, maybe you're not. Because there are things that can take you away from that conversation. They're called distractions. Maybe somebody walking by. Maybe you're looking out the window. Maybe you're trying to put the black jack on the red queen. Maybe you're playing words with friends. Who knows? But when you're on the phone with somebody, you have to do some type of acknowledgement that lets them know you're listening, but also forces you to stay into that conversation, because right now they're talking. And they need to know that while they're talking, you're paying attention. Otherwise, they're going to say to you, hello, are you still there? And unfortunately, maybe you're not. So acknowledge with some type of sound, short words, or a phrase to let them know that you are still engaged in the conversation. Because remember, this has to be a two-way conversation, whether it's on the phone or face-to-face, not a one-way conversation. If it's a one-way conversation, it'll be short-lived, especially if the one-way is coming from you. 5th and final one is your body language. How is your body language? What's the message you're sending non-verbally? If you're sitting in front of that person, 65% or more of the message you're sending is nonverbal. So you should be nodding your head. You should be leaning forward. You should be giving eye contact. You should be doing these activities nonverbally to show that person that you're paying attention. I don't know if I said it in the beginning, on the onset, but these active listening techniques, they work at home with family, friends, because people could care how much you know until they know how much you care. Remember, we already said people look at not listening to not caring. And if I do that at home, I guarantee you my wife's going to go, hey, you don't care what I'm talking about. My kids are going to go, what I'm saying to you is not important. So watch your body language. Acknowledge that you're listening by, I see. Take notes, ask questions, paraphrase. Boy, you really have to work at making sure that what's being said, that you're not missing. Because if you do miss it, you may miss some important points that's going to help you determine whether or not you have an opportunity or whether or not you have a not now. Because you don't want to waste time putting information together for somebody who's not ready to move forward. Is this a solution seeker or is this an information gatherer? That's what you're trying to discern very quickly with this assessment process. So the whole focus of this assessment is not just to ask questions, but also to remove the stigma that they may have of all I'm interested in is trying to tell you what to do and talk you into it and make a sale and then go on to the next victim, so to speak. I'm not here to do that. I'm here to find out if there's a need for the services that I provide. And the only way I can do that is by asking questions and listening, which will give you an opportunity to benefit from those 6 benefits that we talked about. But also, one of the most important ingredients is what we just finished, are those active listening techniques. You know, the taking notes, the repeating back, the asking questions, the acknowledging, and the body language. All those things are so extremely important to make sure that we do. And now I'm going to open it up to see if anybody has any questions about either one of those segments. Because look, people do buy from people who they know, like, and trust. And you only have a couple minutes to buy, to build that know, like, and trust. And the best way to do that is through active listening and asking questions. And now I'm looking for questions that you may have for me, either in the active listening and asking questions, the benefits, or the active listening component, or just anything in general that surrounds making a good first impression. Adina, do we have any questions?
So Marvin, I do have a question. It's through the sales process, what is the appropriate amount of time to follow up with a prospect? So without being annoying or pushy. So what do you think is the proper time frame before you say, all right, they're not gonna close the deal, then I should move on? So what's the appropriate timeline for everything?
Yeah, that's a great point, and it goes back to all the majority of your communications, either asking or listening. So if I have a not now, in other words, they're not ready to move forward right now, and that's a big mistake a lot of people make. They don't ask the question, since you're not ready to move forward right now, let's you and I schedule a time to revisit this down the road. So I'm going to say, when should we follow up on this? So I'm not going to leave that initial meeting without a date and time, and I'll send them an Outlook calendar request, Outlook request, so I can get on their calendars that says, next Tuesday at 2 o'clock or tomorrow at 3 o'clock, we're going to revisit this again. So the problem is, if you don't ask that question as far as asking when we should be following up, it's going to end by saying, hey, thanks for coming out today. I like what you talked about. I'll get back with you. And now you're stuck. But even if they say that, you can go, well, rather than play telephone tag, let's you and I agree on a firm date that you and I can talk about this, and then go to the calendar and suggest some dates. But if you don't end that first meeting with a date and time, telephone tag will definitely start. And one of my favorite sayings is, time kills the deal. And you could be weeks before you get a hold of them again.
Great. Thank you, Marvin. I have another question from the audience. I run into a lot of folks who buy mostly on price. We're never the low-cost provider, and especially if purchasing and accounting is involved, they buy from the low-cost provider. How do you best overcome that?
Well, there's a couple things. One, the whole idea of engaging them with this assessment, this evaluation, to see what their mindset is. And if I know, there's a couple things here, because that's a whole class within itself, and we'll talk more about that on April 20th at the Sales Academy with Cose. But if I know that they're a price-only customer, then I've got to make a determination, do I even want to bring them on? But I'm going to ask the question first, how come you feel the price is too high? Because if you've done a great job with your assessment, really determining what their needs are, and by the way, one of those questions that you're going to ask should be around budget. So I'll ask the question, have you given any thought to what you're looking to invest in this product or this service that you're thinking about providing to them? If they have no idea, hopefully you've asked enough questions and got enough response to be able to throw a number out there to them. Well, based on what you're talking about, you're looking at XYZ right now. Is that going to fall within the confines of your budget? Because I want to give them the appearance that my price is firm. It's all around what you're looking to invest, what your budget, what you have to spend. Because the price I'm going to quote you is fair and it's firm. So there's a confidence level that I have to have going into this. That's why the asking and listening is so important, which gives me an opportunity to sell value and not price.
So any other questions? Anyone, please send them in to us through the question bar or through the chat feature. I'll maybe wait a couple of minutes, a minute or two, and see if there's any more questions for the audience before we conclude this webinar. Marvin's contact information is up on the screen right now. So if you have any questions for Marvin, that is his phone number, that's his email address, that's his website. So feel free to ask Marvin any questions. We did get another question that just came in. Actually, no, we're good. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to Marvin. Again, if you want to join us, the Sales Academy is an all-day session with Marvin and Hale. It's on our website, cozy.org/events. I'll send you also the direct link. It's an all-day sales training session here held at the Cose offices. And if you want any more information, I'll send you an email. But I'd like to thank Marvin. Thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate
My
it.
pleasure.
And for everyone, oh, there's one more question, sorry, before we conclude. With regard to body language, what about lightly touching the client? Are you allowed to touch during the body language?
Yeah, actually, there's books out there just on body language, and here's what I found. I've always been a very personable person, so I'll take my hand and place it on the shoulder or an arm. You know, but there's a fine line there, especially in this day and age. But there's nothing wrong with that if it's done appropriately and in good taste. It's very acceptable for people who aren't going to be offended. So, but you'll get a feel for people by watching their body language, is if that's something that's going to be okay, or they've already kind of demonstrated that you better not invade their space, because space is like 3 feet. And if you kind of lean forward and they've already started angling back from you, they're probably telling you, I'm probably somebody that I'm not that touchy-feely kind of person. But the majority of the time, I'll tell you what, when you're shaking that person's hand, you can get a feel for it. How do they shake your hand? Will they stand off as even there? Or maybe they didn't want to shake your hand. So I'm always watching for nonverbal signals that lets me know, is this a person that I can even at the end shake their hand or touch their arm, or in some cases I've actually given a customer a hug at the end, or they've given me one before I did. So yeah, that's always acceptable. But again, part of your assessment is assessing that too. What kind of personality do I have in front of me?
Awesome. Well, thank you, Marvin, for your time. We have no other questions at this time. So this concludes the webinar. Thank you all for joining us today. Have a good day. Goodbye.
Thank you.